Welcome to my channel Spook Eyes Stories. Texas is more than cowboys and wide-open plains. It's home to ghost towns where silence hides terrifying secrets. Forgotten schools echo with laughter, abandoned churches whisper old hymns, and storms have swallowed entire cities. Locals swear they've seen shadows moving through the ruins. Are you ready to explore Texas' most haunted ghost towns? Brace yourself, because these chilling tales will stay with you long after the video ends. 1. Terlingua, Texas. Deep in the lonely deserts of West Texas lies Terlingua, a town that looks dead but refuses to rest. Once, this was a booming mining community. Quicksilver brought fortune seekers from all over. The streets were alive with workers, families, and children. But when the mines closed, the people left. What remained were crumbling stone houses, a windswept cemetery, and a silence that feels wrong. Travelers who come here today often say Terlingua is not empty. It watches you. The ruins breathe with memories, and the desert air carries whispers that do not belong to the living. The old cemetery is the most feared spot. Wooden crosses lean into the sand, and graves marked with simple stones seem to stare back at anyone who dares to visit. At night, people have reported soft voices in Spanish drifting through the air, prayers repeated over and over, as if the dead themselves are still waiting for peace. Strange lights, like glowing orbs, have been spotted floating between the graves before vanishing without a trace. Locals speak of the miners' ghosts. Lanterns appear in the hills, moving as though someone is still searching for silver underground. The sound of tools striking rock sometimes echoes from the abandoned shafts, even though no one has worked there for nearly 100 years. And then, there are the personal encounters. In 2008, a traveler named John McCabe, who later wrote about his trip in a Texas travel magazine, claimed he stayed overnight in one of Terlingua's abandoned houses. Around midnight, he was woken by the sound of boots crunching in the dirt outside his window. The footsteps circled the house again and again. At first he thought it was another visitor, but when he looked outside, the desert was completely empty. The footsteps, however, never stopped. At one point, John swore he saw a tall figure standing near the cemetery, a man with a wide-brimmed hat, holding a lantern that glowed faintly in the dark. When John blinked, the figure was gone. He left before sunrise and later admitted he would never spend another night in Terlingua. These are not just ghost stories, they are experiences people still bring back today. Terlingua is not a town that died quietly. It is a place where history lingers, where shadows move when no one is there, and where the dead seem determined to remind the living that they never truly left. So if you ever find yourself in West Texas, be careful wandering through Terlingua after dark, because in this ghost town, silence is never really silence. If these eerie tales gave you goosebumps, hit like and subscribe, because the next story might be even scarier. 2. Glenrio, Texas. On the border of Texas and New Mexico lies a forgotten town called Glenrio. Once, it was a lively stop along the famous Route 66. Travelers filled its diners, gas stations, and motels. Neon lights glowed in the desert night, and music from jukeboxes carried through the air. But when the interstate highway was built, Route 66 lost its travelers. Businesses closed. Families moved away. Within a few years, Glenrio became a silent shell of itself, a ghost town stranded in time. Today, the empty buildings still line the road. The old gas station with its rusting pumps, the broken windows of the cafe, and the abandoned motel with its sign that reads, "First in Texas," all stand as eerie reminders of what once was. At sunset, Glenrio looks less like a town and more like a movie set left behind, only here, the actors never left. Visitors describe Glenrio's silence as unnatural. Cars rarely pass, and when you step out into the deserted street, the air feels heavy, as if the town is holding its breath. Some travelers claim to hear faint sounds, distant laughter, a jukebox playing an old tune, or the slam of a door that no longer exists. The most chilling reports come at night. Locals whisper about headlights appearing on the empty road, glowing brighter as if a car is speeding toward you, only to vanish before it ever arrives. Others say they've seen figures moving inside the old cafe, shadows passing by the dusty windows though no one is inside. In 2012, a photographer named Daniel Whitaker stopped in Glenrio to take pictures for a Route 66 project. As the sun set, he walked through the remains of the old diner. He later described hearing the clinking of glasses and faint voices, as if people were still sitting at the counter. When he turned to look, the room was empty, except for a shadowy figure near the doorway. Daniel raised his camera, but the moment he clicked the shutter, the figure disappeared. When he checked the photo, it showed nothing but darkness, though he swore the air still smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke. To this day, Glenrio remains one of the most unsettling stops along Route 66. It looks like a simple abandoned town, but anyone who stays long enough feels it, the sense that Glenrio is not truly empty. Something lingers here, trapped between the past and the present, replaying echoes of a life that ended too soon. For those who dare to stop, the question is always the same: will you only see the ruins, or will you meet the ghosts of Route 66 still waiting in Glenrio? 3. Toyah, Texas. Hidden in the dry plains of West Texas lies the forgotten town of Toyah. Once, this place was full of promise. In the early 1900s, Toyah was a growing railroad town, buzzing with ranchers, travelers, and families. The streets were busy with trade, and the future seemed bright. But time was not kind to Toyah. When the railroads shifted and the oil industry collapsed, people began to leave. Droughts made farming nearly impossible, and one by one, homes were abandoned. Today, Toyah stands as a skeleton of its past: empty houses with peeling paint, collapsing roofs, and streets that lead to nowhere. Visitors who pass through describe Toyah as unsettling, even in the middle of the day. The silence is overwhelming. The wind whistles through broken windows, carrying sounds that don't belong. Some claim they've heard the distant rumble of trains long gone, or the cries of children playing where no children remain. At night, the atmosphere becomes even darker. Locals whisper that strange lights often appear near the abandoned schoolhouse, glowing orbs that move as if searching for something. Others say they've seen figures walking across the empty streets, only to vanish when approached. One of the most chilling stories comes from a traveler named Rebecca Hall, who visited Toyah in 2015 while driving cross-country. She parked her car near the old church and decided to take pictures of the ruins. As the sun set, she suddenly heard the faint sound of a piano playing. The melody was slow, haunting, and seemed to come from inside the church. Curious, she stepped inside. The building was empty, just dust and broken pews. Yet the music continued for a few seconds before stopping abruptly, leaving the air heavy with silence. Shaken, Rebecca returned to her car. But before she could drive away, she noticed something in her rearview mirror. A woman in a faded white dress was standing in the street, staring directly at her car. Rebecca turned to look, but the street was empty. The figure had vanished. She left Toyah immediately and later admitted she could still hear the ghostly piano in her dreams for weeks afterward. Toyah may look like just another abandoned town, but those who visit know it holds something deeper. Its crumbling homes and silent streets feel alive with echoes of the past. It's as if the town itself refuses to be forgotten, reminding anyone who dares to stop that not all ghosts are human. For some, Toyah is just a ruined place on the map. For others, it's a town where the past still lingers, waiting in the silence of the desert. 4. Belle Plaine, Texas. In Callahan County, Texas, hidden among rolling fields and lonely roads, lies the ghost town of Belle Plaine. In the late 1800s, this town was full of life and hope. It was once the county seat, home to a courthouse, businesses, and even a college that promised education and opportunity for the future. Families moved in, students filled classrooms, and the sound of church bells rang across the town. But Belle Plaine's story was short-lived. When the railroad bypassed the area, businesses suffered. The courthouse was abandoned, the college closed its doors, and one by one, families drifted away. Today, all that remains are broken walls, scattered stones, and the ruins of the once proud college. Visitors who come here say Belle Plaine carries a strange weight. The air feels still, as if the town itself is waiting. The ruins of the college stand like a skeleton of the past, its empty windows staring down at anyone who dares to walk through. Locals claim that on quiet nights, you can hear the faint echo of church bells, though no bell has rung here for more than a century. The most unsettling stories come from the ruins of the college. People have reported hearing footsteps in the hallways, whispers in empty rooms, and even the sound of doors slamming shut when no one is inside. Some say the spirit of a young woman, a former student who died tragically, still roams the grounds, searching for something she never found in life. In 2010, a group of amateur ghost hunters visited Belle Plaine at night. One of them, Mark Stevenson, later shared his experience online. As they explored the college ruins, Mark recorded faint whispers on his audio device, voices he swore were saying the words, "Don't leave." The group also claimed to see a shadow move across a doorway, tall and human-shaped, though no one else was there. When they tried to leave, Mark's car refused to start for nearly 20 minutes. Only when they left the edge of town did the engine finally roar to life. Some travelers have also reported seeing a lantern light moving near the old courthouse site, as if someone is still guarding it. Others say they've seen figures watching them from the ruins, only to vanish when approached. Belle Plaine may look like a forgotten place, but its silence speaks volumes. It is a town of broken promises and lingering spirits, where the past refuses to rest. Those who wander its ruins often leave with the same chilling thought: Belle Plaine may be abandoned, but it is far from empty. 5. Sherwood, Texas. In the quiet countryside of Erie County lies the forgotten town of Sherwood, Texas. In the late 1800s, Sherwood was alive with promise. It became the county seat, complete with a beautiful stone courthouse that stood proudly at the center of town. Families built homes, schools opened, and the community believed Sherwood would thrive forever. But fate had other plans. When the railroad came through the area, it bypassed Sherwood completely. Business shifted to nearby towns, people moved away, and slowly, Sherwood emptied. Today, only a handful of ruins remain, with the courthouse standing lonely in the silence, its walls weathered, its windows staring into nothingness. Visitors say the courthouse is not just a ruin, it is alive with strange energy. Those who step inside often describe hearing echoes that don't belong. Footsteps on the upper floor, doors creaking open by themselves, and whispers that float through the air. The town may be gone, but something seems to remain behind in that old courthouse. Locals tell a chilling story about a trial that ended badly in Sherwood's early years. Some believe the restless spirit of a man who was unfairly judged still lingers, pacing the courthouse halls, forever demanding justice. At night, people have reported seeing a shadow moving across the windows upstairs, even when the building is completely empty. In 2014, a traveler named Laura Bennett stopped in Sherwood to photograph the courthouse ruins. She later shared her story in a Texas history forum. As she walked through the dusty hall, she heard the faint sound of voices, as if a trial was still taking place. Papers rustling, chairs moving, and a man's deep voice speaking words she couldn't understand. When she raised her camera to take a picture, she felt a cold rush of air and saw a shadow slip past the far doorway. Startled, she left quickly, but when she developed her photos, one of them showed a faint, transparent outline of a man standing near the judge's bench. Other visitors have described the same eerie feeling, that they are not alone in the courthouse. Some even claim they felt watched the entire time, as if eyes were following them from the empty windows. Sherwood today is a town of silence. The prairie winds sweep through its ruins, and the courthouse still rises proudly against the Texas sky. But those who enter know the silence is deceptive. It is filled with echoes of the past, and with whispers that remind every visitor that Sherwood may have been abandoned by the living, but not by the dead. 6. Barstow, Texas. In the wide deserts of West Texas lies Barstow, a town that once dreamed of greatness. Founded in the late 1800s, Barstow grew quickly when irrigation canals were built, turning dry land into fertile farms. For a time, it was a place of hope and prosperity. Crops grew, businesses opened, and families filled the dusty streets. But the dream didn't last. Droughts destroyed the crops, the canals failed, and fortunes disappeared almost overnight. People abandoned their homes, businesses closed, and Barstow slipped into silence. Today, it is little more than a handful of buildings, ruins standing stubbornly against the desert wind. Visitors who pass through Barstow describe it as unnervingly still. The empty houses and collapsed roofs seem frozen in time, but the silence feels heavy, as if something unseen is listening. Some travelers have reported hearing distant voices in the wind, conversations that vanish the moment you try to listen closely. Others claim the sound of rushing water echoes through the empty canals at night, even though they've been dry for nearly a century. The most unsettling stories come from the old school building, one of the last large structures still standing. People who wander near it after sunset have reported the sound of children laughing faintly, or the slam of a door echoing through its broken walls. Locals whisper that some of the families who lost everything during the drought never truly left. In 2009, a man named Eric Johnson wrote about his strange encounter while traveling through Barstow. He stopped near the schoolhouse to take photos at dusk. As he walked closer, he heard the sound of a bell ringing, clear and sharp, though there was no bell in sight. Curious, he stepped inside the building. The air was thick with dust, but he swore he heard the shuffle of small feet across the floor. He raised his flashlight and saw nothing, only empty, broken desks. But when he turned to leave, he noticed a child's handprint smeared in dust across the wall, fresh as if it had been left just moments earlier. Shaken, Eric hurried back to his car. As he drove away, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw a faint figure standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching him leave. He later admitted he would never return to Barstow again. Today, Barstow is little more than a ghost of what it once hoped to be. The town was built on dreams of water and growth, but now it stands dry, empty, and restless. For those who visit, the ruins serve as a chilling reminder that not all broken promises are forgotten, and some are still haunting the desert winds of Texas. 7 Lobo, Texas. Deep in the lonely desert of West Texas lies Lobo, a ghost town that was once full of life. Founded in the late 1800s, Lobo grew around a natural spring that provided water to travelers, farmers, and railroad workers. For years, it was a small but thriving community. Families farmed the land, children played in the dusty streets, and trains brought visitors through the desert. But the desert is unforgiving. Droughts dried up the spring, and without water, life in Lobo became impossible. By the 1960s, most families had packed up and left. By the early 1990s, Lobo was abandoned completely. The silence that followed was eerie. Empty homes stood under the blazing sun, their windows like dark eyes watching the endless desert. People who visit Lobo today often describe the place as unsettling. Though the town is quiet, it feels as though someone, or something, is always nearby. The wind carries strange echoes through the hollow houses. Old furniture sits untouched, covered in dust, as if waiting for its owners to return. Travelers who camp near Lobo claim they hear footsteps crunching on gravel at night, though no one is there when they look. One of the creepiest spots in Lobo is the abandoned gas station. Locals say if you stand there after midnight, you might hear the faint sound of a bell ringing, followed by the smell of gasoline in the air. Some even report seeing the outline of a man in dusty work clothes standing near the pumps, only for him to vanish the moment you approach. A real story comes from a traveler named Sarah Martinez, who passed through Lobo in 2015. She and her friend stopped to explore the empty houses during a road trip. As the sun began to set, they decided to take photos near the gas station. Suddenly, Sarah heard a loud slam behind her, like a door being shut hard. When they turned around, one of the abandoned houses that had been wide open now stood with its front door closed tight. Nervous, the group walked back to their car. Just as they started the engine, Sarah glanced at the house again. In the upstairs window, she swore she saw a woman's face staring down at them. Pale, expressionless, and gone in the blink of an eye. Terrified, they sped away without looking back. Later, when Sarah checked her camera, she found one strange photo. In the reflection of the gas station window, there appeared to be the faint outline of someone standing right behind her, though none of her friends had been near at the time. Today, Lobo is still standing, slowly crumbling into the desert. Some groups have tried to buy and revive it, but no one has truly stayed. Locals say the desert doesn't want people living there anymore, and perhaps, neither do the restless spirits that remain. 8 Independence, Texas. Nestled in the rolling hills of Washington County lies Independence, Texas, a place once filled with promise and pride. In the early 1800s, it was one of the most important towns in the region. Independence was home to Baylor University, busy merchants, and families who dreamed of building a great community. For a time, the town was alive with laughter, music, and the clatter of wagons rolling down its streets. But the world changed. Railroads were built elsewhere, cutting off Independence from trade. People left in search of better opportunities. Baylor University moved away, taking with it the heartbeat of the town. One by one, the homes emptied, churches closed, and silence fell over Independence. Today, all that remains are weathered ruins, crumbling churches, stone foundations, and graveyards shaded by ancient trees. Visitors say Independence feels more like a memory than a place. The air is heavy with history, and some believe the past has not fully let go. Those who walk through the ruins at night often report strange sensations. The old churches, now roofless and open to the sky, seem to carry whispers when the wind blows through. Some say they hear faint hymns being sung in the empty halls. Others describe cold spots in the graveyards, as if unseen eyes are watching from the shadows. One of the most unsettling places is the cemetery where many early settlers rest. Locals tell stories of ghostly figures seen drifting among the graves, women in long dresses, men in wide-brimmed hats, who vanish as soon as you look directly at them. The silence of the place makes every rustle of leaves feel unnaturally loud. A real-life encounter was shared by Michael Harris, a history student who visited Independence in 2012 while researching old Texas towns. He decided to walk through the ruins of an old church at dusk. As he stepped inside, he noticed how quiet everything was: no birds, no insects, just silence. Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of a piano playing a slow hymn. Confused, he looked around, but the church had no piano and no roof. He quickly took out his phone to record, but as soon as he did, the sound stopped. When he turned toward the doorway to leave, he froze. Standing there was the faint outline of a woman in old-fashioned clothing, her hands clasped as if in prayer. She seemed to be looking right at him. In shock, Michael blinked, and she was gone. Later, when he played back his phone recording, there was no music, only silence. But at the very end, just before the recording cut off, he swore he heard a single whispered word: "Stay." Independence today is a quiet ruin, but for those who visit, it feels alive in its own strange way. The voices of the past may be faint, but they still echo through the stones, reminding us that some towns are never truly abandoned. 9 Indianola, Texas. Along the Gulf Coast of Texas once stood the proud port town of Indianola. In the mid-1800s, it was one of the busiest seaports in the state. Ships from around the world came to Indianola, bringing goods, immigrants, and new opportunities. For a time, it seemed the town would rival Galveston and become a shining city by the sea. But nature had other plans. In 1875, a devastating hurricane struck, flooding the city and destroying homes, businesses, and lives. The survivors rebuilt, refusing to give up. Yet only 11 years later, in 1886, another massive hurricane hit with even greater force. Entire neighborhoods were washed into the sea. Fires broke out among the wreckage, leaving nothing but ashes and ruins. Broken and defeated, the people left Indianola forever. Today, little remains of the once busy port. The sea has swallowed most of it, and only a few ruins and a lonely cemetery tell the story of the town that vanished. But many believe Indianola's past still lingers in ghostly form. Visitors walking along the shore at night sometimes report strange sights. Out on the water, they claim to see lantern lights bobbing in the distance, as if ghost ships are still approaching the drowned port. Some hear the faint sound of ship bells ringing, or the cries of people carried by the ocean wind. The old cemetery is said to be the most haunted spot. Tombstones of hurricane victims stand crooked and weathered, and many visitors describe feeling an overwhelming sadness there. Some even claim to hear weeping near the graves of children lost in the storms. A chilling real-life account comes from David Turner, a fisherman who anchored near Indianola in 2003. Late at night, while checking his nets, he noticed strange lights moving on the water, like lanterns floating toward the shore. At first, he thought it was another boat, but no engine sounds followed. The lights grew brighter, and soon he heard faint voices, men shouting orders, as if working on a ship. David called out, but there was no response. The lights moved closer, then suddenly vanished, leaving the sea completely dark. Shaken, he returned to his cabin, only to find water dripping across the floor. When he looked closer, the water formed the outline of a footprint, bare, wet, and leading toward the door. Yet when he opened it, no one was there. The next morning, he asked locals about what he had seen. They simply nodded and told him, the sailors of Indianola still search for shore. Today, Indianola is little more than broken stones and memories swallowed by the Gulf. But if you stand on the beach at night, you might feel the town's restless history all around you, an entire city that refused to be forgotten, even by the sea itself. 10 Clara, Texas. Tucked away in Wichita County once stood Clara, Texas, a settlement born from hope and faith. Founded in the 1880s by German immigrants, the town was named after the wife of its founder, Colonel Hermann Specht. For a time, Clara thrived with farms, a church, a school, and a tight-knit community where neighbors knew each other like family. But the land was harsh. Drought, disease, and the struggles of farm life took their toll. Slowly, families began to leave. By the mid-1900s, Clara had all but disappeared, leaving behind only a church, a cemetery, and a scattering of ruins hidden among the fields. Though Clara is nearly gone, many believe it has not been entirely abandoned. Visitors describe the area as unnaturally quiet, especially near the cemetery where the town's earliest settlers rest. Locals whisper that on some nights, the church bell tolls even though it hasn't been used in decades. Those who wander through the ruins sometimes report a strange feeling of being followed. Some hear faint German hymns sung in the wind, even though no choir remains. Others say they've seen the figure of a woman in old-fashioned clothing, walking slowly between the gravestones before fading into the night. One of the most unsettling stories comes from Paul Jensen, a traveler who visited Clara in 2010 while tracing his family's ancestry. He arrived at dusk, camera in hand, and walked toward the cemetery. The place felt heavy with silence. As he read the old German names on the tombstones, he suddenly heard soft singing, gentle, melodic, like a hymn carried on the breeze. Curious and a little uneasy, he followed the sound toward the church ruins. Inside, dust covered the pews, and cobwebs stretched across the corners. But the singing grew louder. Paul raised his camera to take a photo, and at that moment, he saw something that froze him in place. In the dim light near the altar stood the faint figure of a woman, her hands clasped as if in prayer, her face pale and distant. Before he could react, the singing stopped, and the figure was gone. When Paul checked his camera later, one photo stood out. It showed the inside of the ruined church, but in the corner, a shadowy outline of a woman could be seen near the altar. Shaken, he left Clara that night and later admitted he would never return. Today, Clara exists only in memory, its few ruins standing quietly against the Texas sky. But those who visit say the settlers' voices still linger, prayers, hymns, and whispers of a community that refuses to be forgotten. These ghost towns may be forgotten by time, but their stories still haunt the present. Which one gave you the biggest chills? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because more haunted journeys are coming soon.